ENT Foundation for inviting me as a speaker. Dear students, my fellow friends, consultant ENT surgeons, colleagues, most of them are in the teaching. I am talking about a very, very common topic, that is acute and chronic pharyngitis, tonsillopharyngitis, and pharyngitis. These terms are often goes by side, tonsillectomy and adenoidectomy. If any moment you find my voice to be bad, you can please point it out, Dr. Sriharsha or anybody, so that I can rectify my system. You know, there are a lot of technical issues. Am I audible to all? Just raise your hand. Yeah.
Yes, sir, you are audible. You can go ahead.
Yeah. So it is a saying, a doctor is a student till he dies. That means once you see the common topic, don't think that there is nothing to learn. We constantly learning, you know, we are always a student. And anyone, once you consider himself not as a student, he is your doctor inside dies. With these words, I start my topic. What is tonsil? Most of the things what I will be talking are almost known to everybody. I try to put it in a framed manner, and at the end of my presentation, we'll like to have the discussion. And there can be some repetition because some of the points I will like to suggest, little emphasize. Most of the things will be practical. I have not hesitated to or others' presentation, but mostly the photographs are my own clinical practice photograph.
Sir, you got mute.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Basically, that wire moved on. Now you can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So sorry for that. See, there are some technical things that keeps on happening. So please forgive me for that. I was going to the previous slide. Just a minute. Yeah, so we were talking about the tonsils. They are collection of the lymphoid follicles facing the aerodigestive tract. All of us know about the Waldeur's tonsillar ring, which consists of adenoid, two tubal tonsils, and palatine tonsils and lingual tonsil. So adenoid tonsils are what? Adenoids, also known as pharyngeal tonsil or nasopharyngeal tonsil, is situated posterior to the nasal cavity in the roof of nasopharynx. All of us are aware of it. Normally, in children, it forms a soft mound in the roof and posterior wall of the nasopharynx, just above and behind the uvula. You can see here in this diagrammatic representation. Tubal tonsils is one of the four main tonsil group comprising Waldeur's tonsillar ring. Tubal tonsil is very close to torus tuberis, located posterior to the opening of the Eustachian tube into nasopharynx. Lingual tonsils are rounded masses that covers posterior region of the tongue. Most of us, while doing a laryngeal examination by mirror or by hypopharyngoscopy, see these as a studs, which very much akin to the circumflex papilla or the taste buds. They are located on the dorsal surface of the base of the tongue, partially surrounded by connective tissue, placing them in the group of partially encapsulated lymphatic organ. So what are tonsils? Tonsils are partially encapsulated lymphatic organs. They are associated, they have associated mucus glands which are drained by duct directly into a single crypts. The characteristic of this, all the tonsils, I have told you about the location in the different areas. The crypts are no crypts in the adenoids, long and branched crypts in palatine tonsil, so in the lingual tonsils. So if you see one which is exposed to your digestive tract have long branched crypts. Epithelial lining is the ciliated pseudocolumnar in tubal and adenoid, and non-keratinized stratified squamous in the other two. They are incompletely encapsulated. A word about embryology. Development begins in the 3rd month of the fetal life. It arises from endoderm lining of the second pharyngeal pouch, mesoderm of the second pharyngeal membrane, adjacent region of the first and second arches. So if somebody asks, the answer is where from it arises? From the second pharyngeal pouch, second pharyngeal membrane, and first and second arches at the beginning. At the 4th month, epithelium of the second pharyngeal pouch proliferate to form solid endoderm buds growing into underlying mesoderm. These buds give rise to tonsillar stroma. Central cells of the bud later die and slough, converting the solid buds into hollow tonsillar crypts, which are infiltrated by lymphatic tissue. Follicles of the lymphoid tissue develop in the 5th month of the fetal life. There are different theories about the lymphoid tissue in tonsil. The most recent and accepted one says the epithelial endoderm cells, which form the glandular bud of tonsil, give rise to broods of lymphoid cells. The older theory was lymphoid cells arise from the blood and surrounding connective tissue, creep in and form follicles around the glandular endodermal buds. A word about anatomy, because this is very important. Palatine tonsils are 2 in number, ovoid in shape, situated in the tonsillar fossa on the lateral wall of the oropharynx. Tonsillar fossa composed of 3 muscles: palatoglossus, that is anterior pillar, palatopharyngeus is the posterior pillar, and superior constrictor muscle laterally forms the larger part of the tonsillar bed. It has 2 surfaces, medial and lateral, and 2 poles, upper and lower. Medial surface, which faces the oral cavity, covered by non-keratinized squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium. It has 12 to 15 crypts, that is epithelial dips in tonsil stroma to form different cavities. Cryptomagma is the largest, and from the main crypts, there can be multiple secondary crypts. Here you can see that this is the cryptomagma and this is like that. Lateral surface represent well-defined fibrous capsule. Tonsillar capsule is a specialized portion of the pharyngobasilar fossa and extend into it to form septa that conducts the nerve and vessels. So this is very important. Now, what are the structures in the bed of tonsil? Lateral surface of the tonsil lies over many structures which form bed of the tonsil. If we go from medial to lateral, they are capsule, loose areolar tissue, paratonsillar vein, pharyngeal fascia, superior constrictor muscle, buccopharyngeal fossa, styloglossus, glossopharyngeal nerve, facial artery, medial pterygoid muscle, angle of mandible, and submandibular gland. Tonsillar bed, capsule, because of the septa, tonsil is not easily separated from its capsule. Loose areolar tissue is one which can easily dissect the tonsil by separating the capsule from the muscle through this loose connective tissue. So this is the area where we dissect. Glossopharyngeal nerve can be easily injured if tonsillar bed is violated. Commonly affected temporarily by edema after tonsillectomy, which produces both a transient loss of taste over the posterior third of the tongue and referred otalgia. It can be addressed surgically through tonsillar bed for its neuralgia. So in glossopharyngeal neuralgia, the tonsillar bed serves as a route for dissection. Styloid process also can be addressed surgically through tonsillar bed for Eagle syndrome. Upper pole extends into the soft palate. This is the diagram you can see here. It extends into the soft palate. Supratonsillar fossa is a potential space enclosed in a semilunar fold extending between anterior and posterior pillar. So these are the importance of this. Lower pole is attached to the tongue. Here, if you see in this diagram, it is lower pole is attached to the tongue. A triangular fold of mucous membrane extend from anterior pillar to antero-inferior part of tonsil. Anterior tonsillar space enclosed by triangular fold of the mucous membrane. Tonsillolingual sulcus separates tonsil from base of tongue. This sometimes can be a seat of carcinoma. Blood supply, all of us know, arterial supply comes mainly through the lower pole with branches from the upper pole. At the lower pole, you can see tonsillar branches of the dorsal lingual artery, ascending palatine artery, which is a branch of facial artery, comes from posteriorly. Tonsillar branch of facial artery, between them enters the lower aspect of the tonsillar bed, and at the upper pole, ascending pharyngeal artery enters posteriorly and lesser palatine on the anterior surface. There are descending palatine branches coming from the maxillary artery. So all of these are the branch of the external carotid artery. Suppose post-op, if there is a torrential bleeding and all the conservative measure fails, which is the artery to be ligated? That is the common carotid or the external carotid. We usually cut the external carotid, not the common carotid. External carotid ligation at the neck is the last stage when all measures fail. Venous drainage is the peritonsillar plexus around the capsule, lingual and pharyngeal vein. They all drain into the internal jugular vein. A word about nerve supply of the tonsil. Tonsillar branches of the glossopharyngeal nerve about the lower pole of the tonsil, descending branches of the lesser palatine nerve, which courses through the pterygopalatine ganglion. What is the applied anatomy? This can be cause of rhiphardotalgia with tonsillitis through tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal nerve. Lymphatic drainage, upper deep cervical lymph node, especially jugulodigastric node, commonly known as tonsillar node. Jugulodigastric nodes belong to anterior group of level 2 lymph node bounded by internal jugular vein, facial vein, posterior belly of digastric. Other areas draining into jugulodigastric are submandibular gland and oropharynx. So if there is a enlargement of the jugulodigastric node, may not be necessary only because of tonsil. Other pathologies in the oropharynx or submandibular gland may also be responsible. What are the functions of tonsils? This always used to be a fight between the pediatrician and ENT surgeons. Immune system's first line of defense against ingested or inhaled foreign pathogens. Tonsil have on their surface specialized antigen capture cells called M cells that allow the uptake of antigen produced by pathogens. These M cells then alert the underlying B cells and T cells in the tonsil that a pathogen is present and immune response is stimulated. B cells are activated and proliferate in areas called germinal center in the tonsil. These germinal centers are places where B memory cells are created and secretes antibody, that is IgA is produced. Tonsil produces L lymphocytes and this used to be the fight between pediatrician who says there is a immunological value, protective value, why you want to chop off the tonsil. The ENT colleagues say if it is a recurrent infection, when the tonsil is not able to work properly, what is the fun of keeping a soldier who has gone rogue? Now, disease of tonsils, all of us know acute tonsillitis. Tonsil and pharyngitis is probably we come across day and night, every day in our day-to-day practice. Epidemiology, we know both sexes are affected in all age group, more common in 5 to 15 years. Peak incidence is the preschool 5 to 6 years of age when they come in contact with the different children. Causative may be bacteria, H. hemolytic streptococcus is the most common. Other may be Staphylo, pneumo, H. influenzae. Viruses, you can name any and you may find most common are the influenza, peri-influenza, herpes simplex, cocciza, rhinovirus, etc. All of us know symptoms are sore throat, dysphagia, fever, referred otalgia, and constitutional symptoms like headache, general body ache, malaise, constipation. There may be abdominal pain due to mesenteric lymphadenitis, simulating a picture of acute appendicitis. So sometimes an acute abdomen may be similar that. Signs, all of us know breath is fetid, and probably with your experience, you can find it just by a look at it. Depending on the type, acute follicular tonsils are red and swollen, yellowish spots, purulent material presenting on the opening of crypts, acute membranous tonsils where you see a whitish membrane, acute parenchyma where the tonsils are enlarged and congested, so much so they almost meet in the midline. Jugulodigestic nodes are mostly palpable. These are some of the clinical picture which speaks about this thing. A catarrhal tonsillitis, this follicular is typical of you can see pus beads coming up, parenchymatous and membranous tonsil, which we will discuss later on. Justin, what happened? Sri Harsha, you can hear? Yeah. Diagnosis is mainly on the clinical ground. Throat culture, nowadays not very often done. Group A, hemolytic streptococcus. This may be at times useful. Some rapid antigen test, ELISA also are done for the rapid one. But we start the treatment empirically. Management, all of us know, I will not go into detail, is the warm saline or betadine gargles, analgesics, antibiotic. Earlier book says penicillin, but nowadays in place of penicillin, because of the toxicity and other problems, hypersensitivity, we use amoxicillin, amoxiclav, beta-lactam, erythromycin, and azithromycin as well. Antibiotic usually continued for 10 days. Complications of tonsil. Chronic tonsillitis is a sequelae when there is a recurrent episode of acute tonsillitis for more than 12 weeks due to incomplete resolution. In fact, infection may persist in lymphoid follicles of the tonsil in the form of microabscesses. Complications may be of two types, which are the cause and remote areas like scarlet fever, acute rheumatoid fever, postcoccal glomerulonephritis, and local peritonsillar abscess, parapharyngeal abscess, cervical abscess, etc. A word about scarlet fever. It is mainly secondary to acute streptococcal tonsillitis or pharyngitis with production of endotoxin. Its manifestation include erythematous rash, severe lymphadenopathy with a sore throat, vomiting, headache, fever, erythematous tonsil and pharynx, yellow exudate over the tonsil, pharynx and nasopharynx. Membrane that is present over the tonsil is usually more friable than seen in the diphtheria. A strawberry tongue with a rash or large glossal papillae is a good diagnostic sign. Diagnosis is by throat culture and Dick test, which is an intradermal injection of dilute streptococcus vaccine. Management is intravenous penicillin. Peritonsillar abscess or quinsy, though now it is not very common because of the advent use of the antibiotics. It is a collection of pus in the peritonsillar space between capsule and the superior constrictor muscle. The pathophysiology, recurrent tonsillitis, sealed off infection in the crypta magma, intratonsillar abscess which burst to form a peritonsillar abscess. Organism same as that of the tonsillitis. Mostly it is found in adults and not in children, usually unilateral. It presents with fever, chills and rigor, severe pain in throat, odynophagia and drooping of saliva, muffled or thick voice, also known as hot potato voice, foul breath, ipsilateral earache, which is referred, trismus due to spasm of the pterygoid muscles. On examination, we can see tonsils, soft palate and pillars are congested and swollen. Tonsil itself may not appear enlarged as it gets buried into the edematous pillar. Uvula is usually swollen and edematous pushed to the opposite side. bulging of the soft palate and anterior pillar above the tonsil. Mucopus may be seen covering the tonsillar region, cervical lymphadenitis. Diagnosis is usually clinical. Culture, cellulitis must be differentiated from abscesses. Rarely we go for a CT neck to see any extension of abscess in other neck spaces. Complications, again, it is very rare now. Parapharyngeal abscess, which is a peritonsillar abscess, you can say a potentially parapharyngeal abscess. Edema of the larynx where tracheostomy is required, Ludwig's angina, septicemia, pneumonitis, lung abscess, jugular vein thrombosis, etc. This I wanted to clarify for the most of the postgraduates. Sometimes they ask DD of the membrane over tonsils, how you differentiate it. There are different categories like membranous tonsillitis, which is abrupt in onset, occur due to pyogenic organism. Exudative membrane form over the medial surface of the tonsil along with features of acute tonsillitis. Diphtheria, though we don't see nowadays, in early 90s up to late 90s, we used to see very often. It is slower in onset with less local discomfort. Membrane in diphtheria extend beyond the tonsil to the soft palate, dirty gray in color, adherent, and its removal always cause bleeding. This is the differentiating feature from the diphtheria to the other membrane. And many a times, along with the tonsillar diphtheria, you find laryngeal diphtheria, and probably in early stage of our career, one of the common indication in children for tracheostomy used to be the diphtheria. Smear and culture of the throat swab, and immediate treatment is the anti-diphtheric antitoxin, which is a life-saving, and that depend on the size of the membrane and severity. The different doses are given. Antibiotic of choice is the penicillin here. Erythromycin is a substitute for the penicillin sensitive patients. Here the child's look is very toxic. Vincent angina, insidious is onset with less fever and discomfort. Membrane usually forms over one tonsil, can easily be removed, revealing an irregular ulcer of the tonsil. Throat swab shows fusiform bacilli or spirochete. Again, treatment is the general like antibiotic, irrigation, and removal of the necrotic debris. Infectious mononucleus, I will like to say a word about it, affect young adult. Both tonsils are usually very much enlarged, congested, and covered with membrane. Local discomfort is marked. Lymph nodes are enlarged in the posterior triangle of neck, along with splenomegaly. Blood smears may show more than 50% lymphocytes, of which 10% may be atypical. Paul Bunnell test is the monotest which shows high titer of heterophil antibody. Management is symptomatic. Antibiotic has got no role. Then agranulocytosis presents with ulcerative necrotic lesion over tonsil and oropharynx. Patient is severely ill. In acute fulminant form, total leukocyte count decreases to less than 2000, whereas usually we see an increase in the leukocyte count. In chronic and recurrent form, total count reduced to 2000 per cubic millimeter with less marked granulopenia. Leukemias, a word about it, in children, 75% of the leukemias are acute lymphoblastic and 25% are acute myelogenous or chronic. In adult, 20% of the acute lymphemias are lymphatic and 80% are non-lymphatic. Peripheral blood smear shows more than 1 lakh total count, WBC count per cubic millimeter. Anemia is always present, maybe more. Blast cells are the seen. That is, immature reticulocytes can also be seen in the peripheral blood picture. Aphthous ulcer, we know this is a very common thing, may involve any part of the oral cavity, let it be oropharynx. Sometimes it is solitary, may involve tonsil or anterior pillar. It may be small or quite large. It's very painful. And again, treatment is symptomatic. Malignancy of the tonsil are the other causes. Candidiasis, we see this sort of appearance, and there we give the antifungal paint or something. Trauma is again a different causes of the membrane. Chronic tonsillitis, when the recurrent tonsillitis more than 12 weeks, may be complication of acute tonsillitis, subclinical infection of tonsil without an acute attack. Predisposing factors are the chronic infection of sinuses and teeth, mostly affect the children and young adults. Recurrent attack of sore throat or acute tonsillitis, chronic irritation of the throat with cough, bad taste in mouth, foul smelling, halitosis due to pus in crypts, thick speech, difficulty in swallowing, choking spells at night, that is obstructive sleep apnea, that we will discuss later on. Again, here different types of chronic tonsillitis are the chronic follicular tonsillitis, where you can see tonsillar crypts are full of infected cheesy material, which shows as a yellow spots. Chronic parenchymatous, here the hyperplasia of the lymphoid tissue. Tonsils are very much enlarged, may interfere with the speech, deglutition, and respiration. Long-standing cases develop core pulmonal, that has been repeated. This is another type where patient comes with the pain. Tonsils are small but infected with history of repeated sore throat. This grading by Brodsky and co-worker defined the tonsillar enlargement on a scale of 0 to 4. Now Mallampati and other classification has taken over because they are more significant for obstructive sleep apnea. So cardinal signs of chronic tonsillitis is hypertrophied, non-congested tonsil, pus, dry beads of the pus on the medial surface of tonsil, persistent congestion of the anterior pillars, persistent jugulo-digastric lymph node in spite of treatment, non-tender glands. There is one Irwin Moore sign, discharge of toothpaste-like material on pressing anterior pillar against the tonsils. Complications can be peritonsillar or parapharyngeal abscess, intratonsillar abscess, tonsillolith, tonsillar cyst. It can serve as a focus of infection for rheumatic fever, acute glomerulonephritis, iliac adenitis, eye, ear, and skin infection. What we call is, it serves as a reservoir of infection. Intratonsillar abscess, here you see accumulation of pus within the blocked tonsillar crypts. And these are the clinical features, are the marked pain with dysphagia, swollen of the tonsil, enlargement usually in the peritonsillar abscess, chronic inflammation like tonsillolith, neoplastic attacks. These are lymphomas, squamous cell carcinoma, extrapedullary. These are to be always taken care of with a word of caution. So wherever there is a unilateral enlargement of the tonsil and not acute, one should think little more seriously. This is a picture of tonsillolith. Why this is coming anyway? Sorry. There's a calculus or stone in the tonsil. Etiology seen in the chronic tonsillitis. The blocked tonsillar causes retention of the debris, which consists of inorganic salt of calcium and magnesium that forms the stone. Clinical features usually seen in adult. The affected crypts gradually enlarge and may ulcerate on the medial surface of the tonsils. Halitosis and sore throat, whitish, foul tasting and foul smelling cheesy material can be expressed from tonsil. Local discomfort or foreign body sensation. Again, diagnosis is by clinical examination, palpation, or by probing. If you remove it, you find a big cryptomagma opening up, which can be a source of potential infection because the food debris go and accumulate there. Treatment, conservative, all of us know about the different pathology, what we do, we have discussed, but it also includes treatment of the conditions of the nose, paranasal sinus, and teeth. Coblation cryptolysis in tonsil cecum-induced halitosis from crypta. This has been a limited dissection, limited surgery done sometime. Tonsillectomy in case of recurrent acute episode, halitosis or foreign body sensation, which I will come in details. A word about tonsillopharyngitis and pharyngitis. This has to be understood. Tonsillopharyngitis is an extension of pathology to pharynx, that is the posterior pharyngeal wall, base of tongue or pillar. If you see, this is the part of the oropharynx. The major area is formed by the posterior pharyngeal wall, base of the tongue, and both the pillars. Commonly, it presents as a sticking sensation in throat with frequent tendency to cough. When it lasts for more than weeks, is referred as chronic pharyngitis. Causes most common, more than tonsilopharyngitis, tonsillitis, it is deviated nasal septum and post-nasal drip, sinusitis, and recurrent tonsillitis. These are few of the more common causes. I don't know why it is not moving. Just a minute. Hey, Harsa, it is not moving, boss.
Sir, once can you stop your screen share?
Yeah. Yeah. Just a minute. Yeah. Yes. It is not moving, boss. Yeah. So we were here. Causes may be a deviated nasal septum, post-nasal drip, sinusitis, or recurrent tonsillitis. Out of all these causes, I found in my practice the deviated nasal septum and post-nasal drip to be the more common cause of chronic pharyngitis. There can be yellowish dots or horny exciseration on the surface of tonsil pharyngeal wall, characteristic of this benign lesion. These are firmly adherent and cannot be wiped off. Result of hypertrophy and keratinization of the epithelium. Patient does not have features of acute tonsillitis, and this appearance sometimes may be like this. These are very common from our practice. This is mainly because of the sinus pathology and post-nasal drip. Here also you can see, and this is one with the aphthous ulcer at the anterior pillar. Again, symptomatic treatment. The causes of pharyngitis can be viral, bacterial, and fungal. I will not go into much detail. Viral, as usual, like rhino, corona, parainfluenza virus, which are causes of the common cold as well. Influenza or flu. Adenovirus sometimes is associated with the conjunctivitis. Epstein-Barr virus causes infectious mononucleosis, also called glandular fever. Bacterial, group A streptococcus, group C and G streptococcus, chlamydia, gonorrhea, mycoplasma, and miscellaneous reasons for pharyngitis are very again common, like GERD, reflux, allergies, postnasal drip, and sinusitis. Treatment of the pharyngitis lies the treatment of the underlying cause. If bacterial, appropriate antibiotic, analgesics, anti-allergics, sips of water of gargles, lozenges to overcome dryness, take frequent sips of water, try to clean the nose by the saline douche or by the oil as I have been prescribing, PPI for reflux and GERD. Tonsillectomy, this I will try to go a bit details in this above, starting from the history and all that. Tonsillectomy, despite being less performed nowadays, still is very common surgery performed by ENT surgeon across the globe. I was just doing a statistic search. In last 50-60 years in US, it is still second most common to myringotomy tube insertion. According to NHS data, more than 287,000 tonsillectomy with or without adenoidectomy. Of this, 129,000 children underwent adenoidectomy alone without tonsillectomy. In UK, as per NHS statistics, the popularity of the tonsil removal has already plummeted. And in 1950s, it was of almost 250,000 done in a year, which is now around 40,000, and the figure is going down. We will discuss in this part history of tonsillectomy, different modalities, that is the cold steel, modern tonsillectomy, changing indications, and tonsillectomy, adenoidectomy, or both. All of us are aware, first known tonsillectomy was performed by Aulus Cornelius Celsus almost 2000 years ago. He used long nail of his index finger to dissect the tonsil and applied vinegar with a pack for hemostasis. Glen in 121-200 CE was the first to advocate use of surgical instrument that was snare. Aetus in 490 started partial tonsillectomy. Then Paul Egignetta described a detailed procedure. Philip Cynic started use of tonsillotome. This became standard for over 80 years subsequently. In 1897, it became more common to perform complete rather than partial tonsillectomy. After American physician Bellinger noted that partial removal failed to completely alleviate symptoms in majority of the cases, his results using a technique involving removing of the tonsil with a scalpel and forceps were much better than partial removal. This debate of partial versus total again came after a century, which we will discuss when we talk about the modern tonsillectomy. Tonsillectomy using guillotine eventually fell out of favor in US. These are the guillotine instruments used different times. This is the adenotome. St. Clair Thompson still we see with a cage or without a cage. Then 1909, George Ernest did a removal of entire tonsil using a method of careful dissection. That was in the history, first complete tonsil. 1930, Fowler started modern tonsillectomy, removing the tonsil, whole tonsil, and nothing but tonsil. That was the terminology he used. This is the common tonsil adenoid tray, which we see in all our medical colleges, and is still one of the commonest performed methodology. In cold steel, there is a supine position under GA, neck extended, mouth gag, endotracheal tube, dissection by identification of the plane by tonsil holding forceps from upper pole, lower pole, scissor, dissector or snare, hemostasis usually obtained by pressure packing, ligation with suture or cautery, which can be unipolar or bipolar. This continues in the cold steel tonsillectomy. A word about the position, this mainly for the postgraduates. They can be asked about the Roche position, what it is, so you know how it is placed. A pillow kept under the shoulder and neck is advantage of this Roche position. There is virtually no aspiration. Larynx lies at a higher level than the oral cavity. Both hands of the surgeon are free. Position helps in proper application of Boyle-Davis mouth gag. Surgeon can be comfortably seated at the head end of the patient. The common dissection, cold tonsillectomy, usually done for a great period of time with the dissection and snare method. Tonsils dissected along with its capsule and lifted out of the tonsil bed. Ultimately remove tonsillar snare at the lower pole. There used to be a wire with thread in and then you top it. Then hemostasis can be obtained also by dissection method past bipolar cautery. There is bipolar seizures, and some people have been doing bipolar seizure dissection, where what you do, you find a plane, coagulate during the cutting, coagulate prior to cutting, pinpoint coagulation, and zone coagulation for hemostasis. Since it formed loss of there can be combination of blunt dissection, then hemostasis by diathermy or dissection with diathermy. Lots of papers suggest diathermy alone increases post-op pain, dissection higher intraoperative bleed, especially in children, but no difference in primary or secondary post-op hemorrhage. Bipolar diathermy is better than ligation for hemostasis. So if we conclude about the cold steel, although considered rather outdated by some, cold steel technique for tonsillectomy has stood the test of time as an effective and safe method. Mind you, everybody must learn it, because if suppose you are doing with high instrument and there is an instrument failure, so you restore back to, we always say PGs must learn to put stitches, because if they are always used to the cautery, they don't practice it. However, with bipolar cautery for hemostasis is well accepted, and results are same as that of the modern tonsillectomy and powered instrument. This statement is substantiated by people who are doing lot more coblation tonsillectomy. So the modern tonsillectomy, the spectrum includes cryo, harmonic scalpel, laser, microdebrider, coblation. With these, there is a re-emergence of concept of partial tonsillectomy. If we see so what is the difference between partial and complete tonsillectomy? In partial tonsillectomy, fundamental design is to preserve the tonsil capsule as a biological dressing, thus reducing post-op pain, reducing recovery time, and reduction in delayed post-op hemorrhage. Disadvantages: increase in the rate of tonsillar regrowth, so contraindicated in recurrent chronic tonsillitis, that is infective cases. And probably that was the reason 100 years back, people left the partial tonsillectomy to go for the complete tonsillectomy. If I track the history of partial tonsillectomy, that is intracapsular tonsillectomy, as we have already described, early 19th century guillotine, then came the cryo, harmonic scalpel, laser, microdebrider, and coblation. I will just spend few time on each of them. Guillotine is used early 19th century, abandoned because of the bleeding. A guillotine is used to simply chop off the tonsils. These are the different shape of instruments. This is one. This is one. What you do is you simply thread in the tonsil and chip it. The term guillotine literally means chopping off the head. Cryosurgery, cryoprobe is based on Joule-Thomson effect, that is rapid expansion of compressed gas through a small probe produces cooling. Tonsil is frozen by application of cryoprobe and then allowed to thaw. 2 applications of 3 to 4 minutes are applied. Tonsillar tissue will undergo necrosis and later fall off, leaving a granulation surface. Bleeding is less due to thrombosis of the vessels caused by freezing. Temperature -82 degree by CO2 and -196 degree by liquid nitrogen. This was postulated to be best method for children with bleeding diathesis, but not used because of the tonsillar regrowth, unpredictable and excessive scarring. This is the instrument which is cryoprobe, you can see, and this used to be the instrument we have used in few cases in early 90s. Harmonic scalpel, this was launched by Ethicon in India in 90s. We did a workshop, some of the people from Bihar and Jharkhand may remember, in conference we had a session on the harmonic scalpel tonsillectomy. And I tell you, post-op we had a tough time. This is an ultrasound dissector and coagulator, sharp blade, frequency 55. Coagulation mechanism is breaks hydrogen bond of protein, generate heat from the tissue friction. Temperature is 50 to 100, whereas electrocautery is 150 to 400. This is an expensive product. This is the setup of this harmonic scalpel, and the results, as we compared the 25 cases we have done in earlies. Then if you see in the ultrasound group and compared to the conventional group, there is no strong advantage over the conventional tonsillectomy, so it was given up. Laser tonsillectomy, it came very fast and went so fast as well. Laser assisted serial tonsillectomy, but it left an impact. Whosoever walks into your clinic must be asking, sir, will you be doing by laser, without understanding what laser is? I think most of the practitioners who are in practice will agree with me. This is laser assisted serial tonsillectomy. Often more than one sitting is required, each lasting for 20 minutes. Due to requirement of multiple seasons, this treatment is more expensive than a single session tonsillectomy. Patient compliance is required, making it unsuitable for young children and anxious person who risk harm if they move during procedure. This is only for adults with enlarged cryptic tonsil. Under LA it is done. Patient sits in front of you and you do it. CO2 laser is a handheld device. Vaporization causes cryptolysis. KTP laser, diode laser are also used. Achieves the functional result of reduction in tonsillar volume without the morbidity of pain and bleeding. That was the USP of laser tonsillectomy. But what results we have seen? If we compare the symptom score with the dissection method, there is not really much advantage over the dissection method. More costly, more sittings are required. Power debrider. Once the debrider came, that used to be used for the tonsil as well as adenoids. This and mainly started by the obstructive sleep apnea surgeons to begin with, and then everybody started. I have done few adenoidectomy with that, not very bad results. But then if we compare the results of the standard tonsillectomy versus this group, there is not much of a difference, and readmission and post-op bleeding rate was rather more. So that is given up. Coblation tonsillectomy is a thing of present era. It is going to stay. I will try to describe it in a bit little detail. This is the instrument. There is a paddle. There is a different setting. This is the probe. This slide is though bit crowded. This all must understand. What is the difference between the different technology? I will take a while to explain that. RFA, radio ablation. Radio ablation, many a times we heard with the cardiologist who used to ablate your arrhythmias. So this functional tissue in this is ablated using the heat generated from high frequency alternate current. RF does not stimulate nerve or heart muscle and can be used without GA. It is used extensively in cardiology. If you want to use a electrocautery, then that's a different. Radio frequency is this functional tissue is ablated using heat generated by high frequency alternative current. Coblation is controlled non-heat driven process. It again uses RF energy. To excite the electrolyte in conductive medium such as saline solution, creating a precise focused plasma. This is very important. When people started coblation, and if you are not using generous saline, you end up using it as a radio ablation or RF, causing a lot of charring. First few surgeons, they accept, or anybody's learning cycle, they have done this mistake. Plasma's energized particle break molecular bond within tissue, causing tissue to dissolve at relatively low temperature. The result is volumetric removal of target tissue with minimal damage to the surrounding tissue. Many cobbleter devices are designed for hemostasis and seal bleeding vessels. This I will explain further. Microdebrider, what it does? It sucks, cuts, and irrigates, causes more bleeding in areas near periosteum or perichondrium. Coblation sucks, evaporates a smaller tissue and irrigates. It has coblation and coagulation modes, so no bleeding. That is the main difference between coblation and a microdebrider. But microdebrider may be more useful in face and MLS surgery like laryngeal polyp, papilloma, where evaporation should be avoided. Harmonic scalpel, as we described just now, has no extra advantage in ENT, though it is used in some centers. A word about the conventional electrocautery. Electrocautery uses energy directly on the tissue. High temperature causes moisture within the cell membrane to explode cells. Whereas coblation uses RF energy to create a plasma. This plasma filled of highly energized particle energy disrupts the molecular bond. If we compare the coblation, conventional electrosurgery, and conventional laser, the main difference we find mechanism in coblation is dissociation by plasma field. Electrosurgery, cellular rupture via acting on tissue. In laser also, cellular rupture by blasting in the tissue. Temperature is the major advantage in coblation. Thermal penetration is minimum, whereas it is deep to moderate to deep. Effect on target tissue is gentle removal. It is rapid heating, charring, and burning. Here there is rapid heating and vaporization in laser. Effect on surrounding tissue is minimal collateral damage in coblation. inadvertent charring or burning in conventional electrosurgical devices, and inadvertent burning and bleeding in laser devices for tonsillectomy. I will just like to show a clipping of the coblation tonsillectomy. You can see here, we pass a red rubber catheter to hold the out of the field. The pillar is pushed and you dissect. There is a liberal flow of the saline through it. See how nicely it is dissected. The movement of you should be like a brush. You don't have to dip in press, never cause injury to the pharyngeal muscles. You are very close to the tonsillar fossa. Part of the capsule is left behind. This is an animated one which I have taken. See how nicely you are leaving behind the capsule and you are very close to the tonsil in coblation. There is no charring. See how nicely it has come out. Now, if we compare coblation with the dissection tonsillectomy, many publications, a double-blind randomized control studies, 10 adults with a history of recurrent tonsillitis, no acute tonsillitis within 3 weeks, same patient, one tonsil coblation, other by bipolar dissection, same surgeon, same anesthetist, same postoperative analgesia, and discharge on the same day, found it coblation is better than bipolar diathermy tonsillectomy. Here, if you see the pain score, median pain score in coblation and bipolar, it is definitely have the advantage. So is in the slough. I am talking of the bipolar tonsil. But a meta-analysis of coblation versus dissection, 29 studies with a total of 2561 participants. Any conclusion can only be reached by the meta-analysis. 7 studies, including adults, 16 children, and 6 both adult and children, published in 2017. Author's conclusion was coblation may cause less pain on post-op day 1, but difference is small and clinically meaningless. Post-op day 3, the difference decreases further, and by post-op 7, there appears to be little or no difference, similar rates of primary bleeding, but cannot rule out a small increased risk of secondary bleeding in coblation. So that was his conclusion. Therefore, it is uncertain that coblation has advantage over the traditional tonsillectomy. And coblation was associated with less pain and quick return and to normal diet and daily activity. So both has its advocates. Never ever rule out that conventional is not to be done. Results are almost the same. Top 5 UK tonsillectomy techniques are still cold steel is done with bipolar cautery to the for hemostasis, then monopolar and coblation. Adenoidectomy, removal of the adenoid, usually done with the tonsil. Common indications are recurrent attacks of otitis media. Here it is not infection. OSA, impaired speech, and CRS, chronic rhinosinusitis. There was a full session by Dr. Satish Jain on CRS and adenoid. Adenoid faces are pinched nostril, nasal discharge, open mouth. This can be asked to the PGs. That's why I have included. It is always done under GA in tonsillar position. Conventional cold steel is with the St. Clair Thompson. You held it in a dagger-like position, remove it, and put a nasopharyngeal pack. This is the coblation technology. Here I have shared this video from Vikas. Here what we do is rigid endoscope is go through the nose. You examine through the nose and the coblation goes through the intraoral cavity. Same setting, only the difference is you dissect from oral cavity and you can see how nicely it is being chopped off gradually. with the margin. First your pericranium is cleared. You go very slowly, stroke wise. Never try to take one bit at the full time. Okay. There is a different wand made for these dissections. So to conclude, although considered rather outdated by some, cold steel technique for tonsillectomy has stood the test of time as an effective and safe operation. However, with this bipolar cautery for hemostasis is well accepted. Long-term results are same as that of the coblation. However, for adenoid, coblation is preferred method as it is under vision compared to the cold steel, which is not under vision and gives best result. A word about changing indications of tonsils. This is over the years, indications of tonsillectomy, adenoidectomy, or combined adenotonsillectomy has changed. Emphasis is changed from infection to obstruction. This is the standard American guideline for indications of tonsil. That is, you all PGs must know that minimum frequency of 7 or more episodes in preceding year, 5 or more of preceding 2 years, 3 or more in each of the preceding 3 years. Temperature is this. There is cervical lymphadenopathy, hypertrophy causing OSA, peritonsillar abscess, though it is not an absolute indication, streptococcal carrier, unilateral enlargement, any doubtful enlargement, adenoidectomy alone is again for the otitis media, secretory otitis media. These are some of the indications. For our postgraduates, they can ask the Paradise criteria. This is the same, more or less, but that one, previous one, is more elaborate and more accepted. Paradise criteria, some old-timer examiner may ask you, so I have included it. Again, the common indications as per our postgraduate book teaching are the infective pathology, then the obstructive pathology, suspected neoplasm, or as a part of the other operation like palatopharyngeoplasty, glossopharyngeal neurectomy, or removal of styloid process. Post-op care is same as we know for all other cases. There is nothing new I can add on this. Preoperatively, we do the routine test. Contraindications if hemoglobin is less, infection. Children under the age of 3 years. Here, if there is a severe OSA, coblation adenoidectomy is done because nowadays the GA has become safe. All these contraindication of age and weight is mainly because of the general anesthesia. Just a minute. Yeah. Post-operative care. This is very important. All the patients are kept in coma position. Whatever method of dissection we have done, keep a watch on bleeding from the nose and mouth. Keep check on vitals. Diets we all know: oral hygiene, hydrogen peroxide gargles, analgesics, antibiotic. Overall indications, this is from the literature, meta-analysis we have seen that chronic hypertrophic tonsillitis with OSA, if you see the indications from infection to obstruction has gone in almost all age groups with an exception of 13 to 19 years, where little more is in the favor of infection. I don't know why it is so. And these are the different indications: chronic recurrent tonsillitis, hypertrophic with OSA, snoring and dental malocclusion, quinsy, unilateral hypertrophy, and is a part of the ear surgery. Children were consistently being operated more for obstruction as compared to infection, which was mostly in the older children. As we discussed later on, those theories are changed now. Even 4 to 10 years, you can see the obstruction is more common than the infection. Complications, all of us know, I will not go into details. That can be immediate, reactionary, immediate hemorrhage, reactionary hemorrhage, secondary hemorrhage, injury to teeth, aspiration of the blood, facial edema, surgical emphysema, airway obstruction. Delayed are the secondary hemorrhage, and almost everything we know about it. I don't need to go elaborate on that. Now, this tonsillectomy, adenoidectomy, or both, This is a dilemma which we must conclude. Since ages, there used to be different opinion on tonsillectomy alone, adenoidectomy alone, or combined. Earlier, infection used to be the main indication. Now, obstruction has been recognized as a major and actual site of obstruction can be identified very easily by this. You must have read in the sleep apnea like DICE and the dynamic MRI. So decision making has become very easy. For obstructive, the part which is obstructing, that only you decide. So a combination of adenoidectomy and tonsillectomy was usually due to obstruction. Then each procedure, you can again see a combination of both. Much higher indication is obstruction than the infection. Infection is the blue line. Sorry. Tonsil infection here, tonsillectomy is more for infection, but adenoidectomy is mostly for the obstruction, and adenotonsillectomy is again for the obstruction mainly. Infection part is gradually going down, which used to be the main problem with us. So to summarize, acute and chronic tonsillitis, tonsillopharyngitis, and pharyngitis or sore throat are the most common conditions in ENT practice. Every second patient coming to our OPD are having these symptoms. Most have same etiology and must be considered together. That is acute and chronic tonsillitis, pharyngitis, and tonsillopharyngitis. DD of different and related conditions and complications of each are important. Tonsillectomy with or without adenoid or adenoidectomy alone still remains one of the common surgery. Cold is still preferred for tonsillectomy as it gives the same long-term result as coblation and is cost-effective. However, for adenoids, best coblation is the preferred method as it is done under vision and compared to the blind method of conventional curettage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was really comprehensive talk on tonsillitis. We
Yeah.
have a few questions from the chat section.
Yeah, please.
And also I would have enabled unmute option.
Yeah.
Anybody who wishes, you can unmute and interact. So the
Sorry, I took a long to describe because the chapter is long and I didn't want to leave anything.
No, sir,
So,
actually you did that.
Thanks the audience for their patience. And yeah.
So first question by Dr. Chandrasekhar. Clinically, how do you say that peritonsillitis has progressed to quinsy?
Sir, as I said, peritonsillitis and quinsy sometimes are taken as a synonym. Once it breaks the capsule, there is collection of pus between the posterior pharyngeal wall and the tonsillar capsule. That is where precisely we dissect and we drain it. So that's not a very big problem to differentiate. Or otherwise, if your conservative antibiotic treatment doesn't respond, anyway, you have to drain it.
Then next question by the same doctor. How do you differentiate hypertrophic tonsils from parenchymatous tonsillitis?
Both are again, sir, your questions are very good. Parenchymus and hypertrophy. It is the element of the parenchyma of the tonsil which has gradually hypertrophied, and mostly it is because of the chronic inflammation.
Yes, sir. So the same question, little again, it was posted by Dr. Kishore.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate acute and acute on chronic tonsillitis?
This is a very good question. Acute means something which is patient getting for the first time. He didn't had a history of that. And chronic, when we call chronic, is there are repeated acute episodes which leads to chronicity. So acute on chronic, there is a existing chronic tonsillitis or history of attacks. Whenever we call acute tonsillitis, classical features of temperature above 100 degree Fahrenheit, or there is the halitosis, there is malaise, those increased platelet count, increased WBC count, neutrophil count. These are the classical features.
And okay, sir. Moving on to next question, by Dr. R.K. Jha.
Yeah, Dr. Jha, very good friend of mine.
Yeah. Still dissection method is supposed to be the best for tonsillectomy. What's your opinion?
I elaborated it again, that dissection and the coblation, because rest of the modern tonsillectomy has been given up, like laser, coblation, they have been given up because of their complications. Coblation and this almost give the same result. Coblation needs more investment. The each bond cost around 13,000 rupees. With one bond, you can do hardly 2 patients or 1.5 patients. And technique require more paraphernalia, whereas a dissection tonsils we are doing since ages, and it has been found in the meta-analysis, post-op results are same for the tonsillectomy. So I prefer, if you don't have the fancy instrument or the fancy patients, you can jolly well with safety, cautery, with tonsillectomy dissection method, hemostasis by bipolar cautery. That is the best method still.
Moving on to similar question.
Yeah.
How can we do adenoid with best result if we don't have coblation?
I told, basically, if you do it under vision, nowadays, in place of using the adenotome, that is the St. Clair Thompson adenoid curate, what we do with our endoscope, you put through the rigid endoscope through the nose, and you, with a blunt instrument, you put a rubber tube to pull the soft pellet away of the field, and with a vision, you can dissect like you do the dissection in that. Only thing is, here the capsule part, you cannot pull it into that, so you have to do it little bluntly. So that is there. Or after doing your adenoid curate, you can examine by the endoscope, see for any tags, any bleeders, and that you can address with a blunt instrument. But I said for adenoid, coblation gives better result.
Next question. In cold dissection methods, do you always ligate the inferior pole, or do you cauterize it?
As I said in my presentation, purpose is hemostasis. Hemostasis may be by pressure, by ligation, by cauterization, or by snare. Snare is a very good instrument. It's what snare does. If you can see my finger, snare basically, when you pull it, the outer layers of this encapsulate it. So if what we do in the tonsil, you do one side of the tonsil, keep a pack, go to the other side. When then other side is done, you pack it, come back to this side, remove the pack. If there is any bleeder, then only you have to apply your bipolar cautery probe or a ligation. If there is no bleeding, there is no need to cauterize or putting a stitch. After seeing that, you can come back again. In one case, in dissection tonsil, I always infiltrate some local xylocaine, which gives a tremendous relief in the post-operative pain. So when I go to inspect the other side for the bleeding, I inject the local xylocaine locally in the tonsillar fossa. So post-operative pain is much, much less.
And what about peroxide applications, or any your experience?
Hydrogen peroxide?
Yes.
In acute cases, in the per-operative, I usually don't, because what happens, that causes lot of effervescence, and that can rather make it difficult for you to pinpoint the bleeder. Yes, that is done for the secondary or reactionary hemorrhage, because that causes mild cauterization. You pack it with the hydrogen peroxide, and that may seal the small bleeder. Hydrogen peroxide has a place in post-op and reactionary and the secondary hemorrhage. Mild one.
Next question by Dr. Varsha.
Yeah.
What is the difference between warm saline gargles and betadine? Which one do you prefer post-operatively?
Frankly speaking, I always prefer warm saline and not betadine. Why, you ask me? This betadine I said because this was in the postgraduate teaching. And mind you, Dr. Varsa, our audience is postgraduate. Some of the examiners may be fond of that. So you should keep a scope for that also. Warm saline basically is an isotonic one. It is not going to interfere with your oral flora, and it will simply wash off the infection. Whatever exudates are there, whatever crusts are there, that will wash it off. So warm saline is good enough. I, in my practice, don't ask for betadine. If there are some ulcerative lesions I see, then I ask for hydrogen peroxide 1:4 gargles. Or if there are phthous ulcer, then also, yes.
Next question. So we have seen a lot of usage of face masks. Did it affect the incidence of tonsillectomy cases by Dr.
Not really, Nabil, not really.
Okay. Next question by Dr. Ram Adhikari.
Yeah.
Why do we see post-op bleeding more in winter?
Dr. Adhikari, I am not very sure if that is so. Frankly speaking, if a properly done tonsil and you follow it well, I advise my patient for 48 hours have the liquid diet. It is basically overzealous fruit juice or something sour that causes irritation in the tonsillar bed. Mind you, the tonsillar bed, you have denuded it of the covering. So that is more sensitive. Any insult to that can induce the bleeding. About the winter, rather, I ask my patient to have chilled milk and ice cream post-op, because that chilling causes more of compression of the vessels. And for at least for 24 hours, I ask my patient liquid diet, chilled milk and chilled ice cream. And I'm very satisfied with that. So not really, that season doesn't have. Rather in summer, I have seen more incidences. So.
Very interesting question that was. So next question, Dr. Joy. Can you explain the Centaur criteria in tonsillitis?
I'm sorry, Centaur criteria I didn't come across, maybe theoretically. Why don't you unmute and speak it, Joy, or somebody else? Professor Chandrasekhar can reply. Or anybody. Dr. Harsa, we have finished with the questions, or there are a few more?
The last question, sir.
Yeah, okay. So anybody wants to add up, they can unmute themselves. Harsa, make them unmute if they want.
Yeah, unmute option is enabled. Anybody can.
Okay. Mohit Lavania, I can see. Dr. Dwarkanath Reddy is there. He is a senior person. He can say something. Dr. Dwarkanath Reddy, sir, good evening.
Good evening, Mukha sir.
Good evening, sir.
Sir, Mohit here, sir.
Yeah, Mohit. Yeah.
Yeah, sir, I don't know the Centaur criteria, sir.
Because I never came across. So anybody, if they know.
So if people like teachers like you don't know this, how can I know?
No, not necessary. Not necessary. See, I always said, boss, we are always students. The moment I think myself not a student, my doctor is died.
Yes,
Dr.
sir,
Sudhakar
yes,
Vedya, sir, if you can throw some light or any comment, sir.
So I found this in the website.
Yeah, good. So Centaur criteria for you, that is there. It is the scoring system tender. So see, basically, if you go to all the systems, more or less we pin down to the same thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Pratyusha, Centaur criteria for pharyngitis. Sri Harsa, is there any other criteria for pharyngitis also?
Maybe, sir. Even I'm hearing for the first
Okay. Time. See, basically, these criteria are, again, I will take lot of guidelines doesn't really work. One should be very practical, and none of the sensible examiner will ever ask this sort of questions. So, Bhavani something asked, red color we are not able to see clearly. Which red color? I don't know. Bhavani, if you have to unmute and say,
Maybe some slide there was a red color.
okay, maybe, I'm sorry. That is, see, basically what happens when we transmit, there is a change.
Yes, sir. And even each participant screen may be different.
Yes, that's true. To be
Yeah.
very honest, Sri Harsa, I can participate better with my mobile because that's a new edition than the laptop. So,
One last question we'll take, sir, before we close.
yeah,
Is
please.
there any effect of honey used in post-op patients for tonsillectomy?
Monuka honey, I saw a lot of literature. Monuka honey, not the conventional honey, but again, if you take honey, there is no damage. Only thing, it should be soothing to the ear. What I say, soft diet. Monuka honey, there are some publications. They say if you apply post-op, there is no chances of bleeding. Otherwise, also, in whole of my career, I had to take only a couple of cases to theater for ligation of the vessel in secondary hemorrhage. So I think most of the people might be having this more or less the same experience. So if anybody has to comment anything, they can unmute and speak.
Yeah,
Dr.
Prakash, good
Chandrasekhar,
evening.
Dr. R.K. Jha.
Prakash, good evening. Dwarkanath Reddy here.
Sir, your blessings. Yeah, Dwarkanath, sir.
Anyway, just I came in. Anyway, now I think having heard, I think it's parts of it ahead. I think you have given a good accountability of everything.
Yeah.
Only one practical aspect now. I just want to, because there are some of our colleagues are there, which is certain times this do happen about this bleeding. So we had a case some time back. So they, after a couple of days, they came back. The fossa is so clear. Ultimately, what is happening is certain times, these children and all, the proper diet is not there, and sometimes they do give some sort of a analgesic and all. So that causes gastric irritation, and they are going to
Yes.
have hematemesis rather. So this is also to be kept in mind, because this is not a rarity among the rarity. We have seen a couple of cases. So
Yes.
this is one thing because suddenly sometimes this also can happen. So I think that has to be kept in mind also. The reason, one of this the reason, if the fossa is very clear, so there is every chance this can happen sometimes. So this is one thing I just want to bring a practical aspect of it. Sometimes something we may miss also. Okay.
I think, sir, you made a very great point, because during the surgery, the anesthetist put a pack around the tube, but patient can swallow passively. There is lot of blood which can go, and immediate post-op or second day, patient can vomit, as you said very correctly, and the patient party may think it to be a bleeding. So that's a very practical point. Yes,
That
I
is one
agree.
aspect of it, that the analgesic may sometimes cause gastric irritation.
Gastritis, yes, sir. That is also a
Erosions
cause.
also will also cause bleeding. So that also
Yes.
has to be kept in mind, and you have to be very careful in giving the analgesic also. And if the child is of little bit older age, along with that, it is always better you give some sort of a PPI along with that, so that this will not
Yes.
happen. So this is very important to rest of things and all we have been seeing and hearing, but this is one practical point. I just want to bring it at this stage.
Excellent point, sir. Well taken. I mean, everybody must be careful about these things. Thank you, sir.
Right.
So, Sri Harsa, if there is no one want to, we can, if anybody else want to make some point, comments.
We'll wait for a minute, sir. If anybody wishes to talk, we'll.
Yeah. I must thank Dr. Sri Harsa, his colleague at Sahasra ENT Foundation. They are doing a marvelous job and trying to cover or almost covered all aspects of ENT. And for PG, it's a lottery, I will say. You have take your tests for them, mock test for them, question answers, MCQs, whatnot. So I must compliment that Sahasra ENT Foundation and Dr. Sri Harsa and his team.
Thank you, sir, for the blessings. It has been a really long journey for us. We are trying to actually more,
It's with a very noble idea And everybody of us, I will say, we should try to be part of it. And for me, to be a part of it, it's a great pleasure, I tell you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll be soon doing, we are at the end of our PG teaching program.
Yeah.
Probably we have just a thyroid part left and 3-4.
Mhm.
Then we'll be moving on to masterclass series, especially the subspecialties in ENT like sleep apnea,
Yeah.
plastics, allergy.
Good.
We'll be doing 7-8 webinars from each topic.
Yeah.
And also, we have some interesting lineup of speakers, mostly from US and UK.
Mhm.
In touch with few of them, and we'll be having very interesting speakers who are specialized in their field, and we'll be getting on board from July, August onwards, and we'll be having 4 webinars every monthly and only on Sundays.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
No, I must compliment most of the speakers. I have attended many of your classes, rather most of them.